The Valley Current.
Hey, Jan. Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. It's 100 degrees here today. Yesterday was pretty warm too.
100 degrees, Jesus.
Yeah.
What's happening to California?
California is fine. It was bizarre. It got warmer as I kept going north.
Oh, because you were driving, right? You went to a conference, right?
I wasn't even originally planning for this, but the more I think about it, at least when I was going to grad school, if you did like front end work, that was considered like kind of beneath you. Right. And now that AI is gaining so much traction, I think it's going to come back front and center because right now the only interaction with AI is chat, right?
Right.
So you would behoove me to kind of, if I don't necessarily have to get really good at it, but I have to know what the cutting edge is. So I thought I'd just eat the vacation and come on up here because that's the best time to learn through immersion. So
as you were driving on the roads, did you see the fires or what'd you see?
No, I didn't see any fires. There was nothing that much to see. But it was funny as I was driving. That's when I heard the podcast about the editor from The Wired, And then just early that day, I was reading the article by Gary Marcus's interview on Fortune. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the things that you and I discussed, way back in July and why I thought the direction kind of we need to go in this, it was like, this guy was saying the thoughts out of my head. And I thought it was just more than coincidence. So I sent those posts to you as soon as I could. But
well, let's talk for a few minutes about the MIT report because I think it's newsworthy. And I think that a lot of people don't realize, and I realized for a long time that most digital projects, which you could say have been going on for decades, probably really now for at least 5 decades, if you really look at mainframe work that started back in the 60s, maybe 6 decades, most of those projects fail. And a lot of litigation that we historically saw at Computerlaw Group was about those failed projects. Now, over time, more and more platforms were created that more or less mitigated the risk because the underlying platform was pretty settled, such as, for example, CRM, which is now mainly Salesforce, but there's lots of other companies too. And then the work was at the work was
of other ones, right?
Yeah, and the work was really on the user interface and the way the user interface was going to work because the underlying platform was settled. But a lot of people want to do with AI a lot more than that, and so they're seeing, I guess the quote was 95% of these corporate projects, and they tend to be big dollar projects, are failing. And there's lots of reasons for it, but what's your take on it?
I think just twofold. The first comment that I have is what you mentioned earlier, that there were always projects like this. And I see a lot of parallel to when manufacturing just moved to China, right? It took a few years for them to get good at it. Made in China used to mean synonymous to, second-rate quality.
Well, I remember when Made in Japan was viewed that way as well.
That's exactly what I'm trying to get at. But the decided difference between that transition, which I think the software is going through, and if you read the report more carefully, they're essentially trying to attempt things a lot more end-to-end than a simple single API, single function, like the paradigm you had mentioned earlier. And I think the Pandora's box is about to open is that in a headlong rush by the executives to, be the first to the punch to save as much money as possible, they're going to expose themselves to all kinds of, vulnerabilities and hacks that they can't even fathom. And I love that quote by the that Marcus guy, Dr. Marcus on Fortune, he said, the single biggest problem we have is, we give these human attribute to these entities. The exact term is what, anthropomorphizing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said that that's going to be a terrible pitfall. And not only will we end up with, less than ideal type of quality end products, the way Katie Drummond was talking about, but I think they potentially could have irrecoverable vulnerabilities and exposures, that they can't put the genie back in the bottle. And I think that that's the danger here. You see some articles floating about this CEO of a company called Ignite Tech said he fired 80% of his staff and then remade the entire, he said he tore it down to the studs and built it back up. And it's catchy and it catches headlines, but reality is that Ignite Tech is not a software development house. What they do is they buy software companies that have revenue and then they create a portfolio of these things, right?
Right.
So it's not entirely fair if you were to draw an analogy of someone in real estate who manages properties to kind of preach on high about the virtues of construction. Those are completely different paradigms that even though they're both in real estate, right? One only has to kind of manage many software companies and they look for economies of scale, like, how to have a cloud strategy. But this is not the outlook or the, I don't want to say misrepresentation, but the illusion that somehow, good software can be created from the very, very start that continues to evolve using AI. It's just not there yet, So
most executives, they sort of get on the bandwagon, and they say to themselves, "Well, if we don't do this, we're going to be at a competitive disadvantage."
Yes.
So they immediately say to themselves, it's like almost a copycat phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And by the way, this also applies to law firms. I can't tell you the number of big law firms that basically are scaling up one or the other type of AI project. Mm-hmm. And they're using it, they're typically doing it with separate teams that are kind of sidecar. They're not really lawyers. I mean, the lawyers are the subject matter experts. Mm-hmm. The people are in a team that are kind of separate LLCs that have separate incentives, and maybe they're thinking eventually they could even spin them off. But they want to believe that the pyramid structure is going away, and there's effectively going to be a collaboration between a very seasoned, very competent, very technologically savvy lawyer, or maybe teams of lawyers who have at their fingertips effectively the 7 or 8 best ChatGPTs, Perplexities, Claudes, Copilots, Metas, every flavor of the month. And those different tools, if you want to call them tools, are going to have their own little personas. So one is going to be kind of a grammar checker, and there is actually a product that's an AI product specific for that called Grammarly. One is going to be a researcher, because some of these tools do legal research better than others, including from Westlaw and from Lexis and Casetext. There's a bunch of them. And some of them do writing better. I know a lot of people that think Claude does writing, regular textual writing, far better than ChatGPT. And there are other people who say ChatGPT does tables and math better than Claude. So you could see that maybe there's going to be some differentiation, but of course a professional is probably going to have at his or her fingertips all of them. And ultimately that's probably going to be part of the training even in high school, dare say maybe even in grade school. And we can have a debate about that, but I have to believe that people are not going to learn how to type anymore as much as they're going to learn how to prompt, if you know what I'm saying.
I do, but I don't think prompt is a skill in itself. The argument you can make is that prompt forces you to be a more clear thinker, someone who's willing to drill down very, very deep and very, very precise, right? So it would be as if you are doing the ideation and the outlining of the software all in your mind before you type a single line of code. So that might be helpful, but to echo what Katie Drummond was saying is that I think what this AI is really doing is exposing our laziness and weaknesses. The fact that the professor only used the vehicle writing term papers to judge whether the student had learned the material is the fallacy here. It should have been a lot more interactive. It should have been something that could not be so easily defeated by, having, I forgot which model you said does the best writing to whip something out. My biggest fear is that, you'll just, everybody will converge, right? No one will figure out how to, find their own voice and everybody will sound like Claude. And I think the fallacy resides with the professor who, in this hyper-competitive world where research is prized about teaching, that they, in my opinion, kind of got lazy. And rather than having an actual vehicle that really validated whether his or her pupil were learning the subject matter, it was kind of like a non-interactive and kind of offstandish. Go write a paper. In essence, it could very well been that, they were having somebody else write these papers for ages. The only difference now is that this is scaled up and now it is highly repetitive and no one has their own voice. So I think this is a great way to tease out the vulnerabilities of some of the pedagogy and other institutional things that we maybe wrongfully had relied on for so long. And this is a wake-up call,
Well, I want to tell this story because I ended up spending a lot of time listening to a podcast that was sent to me. Someone, I forget who, sent it to me saying, this guy really captured what might be the future of knowledge work. And I forget the gentleman's name, but the name of the podcast, I'll send it to you, is What Can Go Wrong? And the storyline is the guy who wrote the original movie script for the Steven Soderbergh movie called Contagion, which was 10 years before COVID happened. It basically more or less predicted that there'd be a pandemic. And it's still available on Netflix. He's been trying for like the last 10 plus years to come up with a script for Contagion 2, which is essentially the follow-on sequel to Contagion. And I don't know whether you want to call it writer's block or something else, but he basically could not come up with an angle that didn't seem trite. So they put together a team of essentially what I was describing, 7 or 8 different flavors of different ChatGPTs, Claude, Perplexity, the whole lineup. And they gave them personas and they put them in a writer's room and had them respond to various prompts that this guy generated. And he talks about what the experience was in doing that. And I think his overall conclusion was it was like a brainstorming session. It did help. But what they discovered, and this is the insight, and that's why when I send you this, you really should spend the time listening to the 7 or 8 episodes, because there's a lot of ideas in that really make me think that the future of venture capital is going to be incubating groups of people to do what this guy discovered from this little exercise, create a single co-author that has the best of these seven different personas, 7 or 8 different personas around the room. He's number 8 or 9 in the group. And, it's like a baseball team, but basically they're all contributing differently. But put them all together in one co-writer and make that co-writer get to understand everything that's going on in the principal author's head and work in a sort of collaborative way. And I'm telling you, at first you disbelieve that this is going to work. And he disbelieved that it was going to work. And at the end, by the time you get to the end of the story, you say, you know what? I think he essentially created a writing partner. Now, this was the original idea for Microsoft's Copilot. I don't think the execution has been that great by Microsoft. I don't think the execution's been that great yet by ChatGPT, even 5.0. But this guy essentially had a team of AI scientists create, on top of an LLM, I don't know which one they chose, they didn't disclose that, a version of something that was going to work well with him, very personalized version. So imagine if that becomes the future, and you essentially, if you have a team of 3 people, they may be more like a team of 6 or like a team of 12, depending on what this person can do, because this AI can do a lot of the grunt research that often is like 90% of the time consumption. And when you go listen to the end, I think it's about, 7 or 8 different episodes that are about a half hour each. So it might be 3 or 4 hours, but it's worth listening to. I actually binged it and listened to the whole thing, and mostly on planes, but basically it was like, hey, this is the best explanation of what knowledge work may end up looking like in the next several years. And this guy ended up saying to Steven Soderbergh, I think I now have the idea for what Contagion. In fact, I think I even have the script written for what's going to be Contagion 2. And what he discovered is you can't extend that to the music of films. That music, it really takes someone who's really creative in music. He tried to even extend the AI to doing the music, and he found out that turned flat, even with various products that were tried. So
I think the operative word in the scenario is that this gentleman knew what was best in his realm, which is script writing, right? Mm-hmm. And he may have found the perfect solution where, as you pointed out, many possibilities can be very quickly generated. But at the end of the day, it takes deep domain knowledge to be able to connect the dots. And he figured out what little pieces of the 7 different attempts to put together for the winning formula, right? And somebody who's a composer might be able to do the same thing for a music score. But you see similar things where we talked about in the past, where Goldman Sachs has replaced large army of equity traders by, distilling the knowledge of the 4 top experts in that field. And, I have like front row seats with, some family members who are involved in this space that, as you pointed out, they don't have to waste the time to actually run experiments in the lab. It's much faster to be able to create very complex computer simulations that will, in your analogy, come up with many plausibilities. So it really prevents the possibility of falling down rat holes and wasting lots of time. So I absolutely concur that that probably most likely will be the future of knowledge workers. But at the end of the day, it takes somebody with the domain expertise to figure out how to put that together into a solidity, solid unit, whether it's a script, musical score to the movie, right? So that's the big takeaway that I think. I think even like a year ago or as recent as 6 months, people like Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, kept saying, in a given time, we're going to have someone with the equivalent of a PhD who can assist you. Well, it's turning out that the bot can maybe solve a problem that a typical grad student would have to take, like a qualification exam, to be able to be permitted to pursue a PhD. But in no way, shape, or form can it actually come up with anything novel. It can propose many possibilities, but at the end of the day, it cannot connect the dots the way that screenwriter connected dots to come up with the right hook for the script, or the composer to come up with the right hook for the song.
Right. That's, by the way, that insight that you just basically clarified or expanded on is missing from the MIT report. The MIT report is a good report for the 20 or 25 pages that it is. And this is just a week ago. But it's at the surface level saying, look, for example, big headline, 40% productivity improvement. The truth is, when each person creates for this job that they have, the coworker that is basically unpaid, no tax withholding, no Social Security, no health benefits, they're creating a body double. They're creating a second extension of a brain, a right and left brain to some degree, maybe more left brain than right brain, or vice versa, depending on how you want to look at it. And they're customizing that AI. So the interesting question that's going to come up legally, because these people work for corporations, and they typically do work for hire type work where all of the IP is owned by the corporation, is that persona is going to become so attached to that individual that individual is either going to have a very hard time leaving the job because he's going to be like, I can't leave the marriage that I have to this coworker that I work every day with, that I love working, when you're in a really solid partnership, working really well together. Or when he leaves, he or she's going to take it with them and say, wait a minute, this is too much part of me for you to say that somehow I can't take it with me. And I don't think anyone's thought about that yet. In the legal community, I don't think anyone's really thought about when you're so attached to a piece of technology that it's essentially almost part of you. Like, it's basically part of you. It's an extension of you. It's like some lawyers that often when they're practicing, they're writing books in parallel, and they have to negotiate with their firms about, hey, if I don't stay at the firm, I want to take my book with me. Well, okay, maybe we have to divide the royalties or do something else, depending on how much the firm feels like they've invested in the book. But I have to tell you, this is a different kind of thing, right? This is really like an extension of a persona. And that's going to make a difference, right? That's
incredibly important. I think you're getting to a crux of something that's, irredeemable. And that is that, no matter how we contribute our work, we're usually part of like a team, like a scenario of group of people, circumstances, resources made available to us that allows us to be successful. And it's really, really hard to replicate that just by taking that person. And, I'm sure you heard this joke about a tailor. A tailor goes to meet the Pope, and when he comes back, his neighbor says, well, what was the Pope like? And he says, he was a very lovely man. He's a 40 regular. Since you're an attorney, you're thinking about legal aspects. The aspect that I'm thinking about is, what does it mean now when you do take away a lot of the people who, I'm sorry to say, regardless how complex they were doing, a lot of the stuff that they were doing was highly repetitive and programmatic, right? What does it mean that in that scenario, how do you identify the right person who more than not, like, we know these people in our midst, we call them things like glue, we call them linchpins, but how do we identify the right sort of person that can completely orchestrate and utilize these automations to bring something to complete end? And I think, in all fairness, I think the MIT report was trying to report facts, whereas I'm kind of pontificating opinions, right? So I think what that report was trying to say is that if you set the very, very high high bar and say, is AI ready to deliver completely end to end, right? Without any kind of human intervention or supervision? The answer is no, only 5% of the time, right?
Right.
I'm trying to guess why that's the case, right? And that's because precisely what Professor Marcus said, that in the out of the CEO's FOMO, they just jumped in and maybe tried things that are a little bit premature. But I think our ability to work with these tools become indispensable, especially if you know how to correctly choreograph and connect the dots and be able to take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and put the whole thing together that has the hook, that is the complete unit. And I think that personality is going to be ever so more important, because that kind of personality, the person who can play the linchpin, can do so much more with so many fewer human beings, right? It's very much like a thought leader personality, be able to juggle many places of the air and so forth,
Well, we know, and there will be probably even this year, a unicorn, meaning a startup company that becomes $1 billion valuation with probably less than 5 people. I mean, we've had other examples where it's like 19.
That's the holy grail we're looking for. Unfortunately, up to now, everything that has come has been that valuation without, the revenues that follow, right?
Right.
To get a sane valuation of a unicorn, I mean, traditionally, you'd have to have something in the neighborhood of $50 to $100 million ARR,
Right.
And to be able to achieve that kind of, oncurring revenue with just 5 people, I think that's a challenge. It better be the right 5 people that can do the situation we've been describing in this conversation,
Well, there have been examples, and the one that I'm thinking of is the one that has become so famous, which is, I think, the group that actually created WhatsApp, which is in some ways the most powerful product that Facebook has, Meta has after Facebook, or maybe even on top of Facebook. I think those guys got like a $19 billion purchase deal, and I think it was only about 15 of them or 10 of them. I forget the numbers, but the numbers were staggering. And
it was remarkable.
They produced something. They produced something that's an amazing tool. If you go around the world, whether it's Japan, China, Europe, anywhere, everyone's on WhatsApp. I mean, in China, it's WeChat. But basically, this idea of, hey, I don't need to remember a phone number anymore. You're in WhatsApp. I just look for your name in WhatsApp.
Yeah, and I think that $19 billion went to pay for the 500 million new users, right? Mm-hmm. Especially non-American based, that made that deal so enticing and gave a clear indication where they could take Instagram, right? So Instagram basically grew to its full potential once the two were nurtured and grown together. But I think I agree. I think you could very easily find an essential service where, if the system is built correctly and they can step aside all the landmine that we're talking about. Like right now, the single biggest problem that I see is just exactly what do you think is going to happen when you hand over the driving and you let some other entity drive without a perfect security model. Like these things are being interconnected with database and other accesses using something called MCP, and it's very, very rudimentary, right? So I think we're going to find all kinds of unanticipated surprises, or maybe unpleasant surprises.
If you look at where we are today in real estate, most people that are looking for an apartment or a place to buy, they go to Zillow or they go to apartments.com and they type in a few terms like, I want to be in Palo Alto, I want to be in Menlo Park, I want it to have 2 bedrooms, I want it to have 2 bathrooms, the rent can't be more than this much, the price of the house can't be more. They type in all that stuff and boom, a list gets generated. They haven't talked to a real estate broker. They haven't talked to a real estate agent. They haven't even called up any real estate professional. And guess what happens? The buyer side commission goes away. Basically, it's this person that's got the listing that is in control of the commission. And that person, along with the seller, decides whether to give a commission to the real estate professional that might theoretically still be helping the buyer or the apartment dweller figure out. And those people, and there were a lot of them that became real estate professionals. They studied, they took the exams, they got their license, they paid their dues, they did their CLEs, and continuing education. They did all that stuff. Their business has been crushed because they say, if I don't get the listing, I have to beg for a commission because I'm not allowed to just sort of preset, or the world doesn't allow that presetting anymore. And most sellers are like, hey, they found me on Zillow. Why? It wasn't like there was some concierge approach. And if you think of Zillow, it's like an AI. It's essentially a tool that if you put in the list that you want of what you want, and I'm sure they'll eventually create this, they're not yet there from the interface point of view, it'll spit back. Here's the 10 properties that meet your criteria. And that, I think, is becoming more and more common. That is another example in the law profession. The client comes to you and says, I already got this answer from ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or Meta or whatever tool they used, and I want to know if it's right. And I want to pay you for the 15 minutes that I'm asking you to spend to tell me whether it's right. And what lawyer is going to want to do that? I mean, what lawyer is going to want to sell his time in 15-minute increments? I mean, it's like you have to have thousands of clients then to make a living. I mean, think about it. If you think about it from that point of view. So the models, all of these models are going to be under dramatic change. in one form or another. And maybe the change ultimately will be an extinction of certain types of work because it's been taken away by the machine, right?
Same thing happened with the travel agent, right, from the .com. So these things can go, but usually what ends up happening is that the replacing technology does not meet all needs. Like Carvana has been the world's worst discovery for passing along lemon cars that you don't want anymore, precisely because you can't get the facts on the ground. So maybe in your analogy about real estate and so forth, if you can come up with a clever AI that can add a physical component, maybe figure out how to monitor 24 hours or 72 hours to get a little too loud, or you live close to the train station. Anybody who can offer insights, right, that's physically relevant, I think will have a leg up on that. So I can't speak about the law transition, but I think that's where it's going to go. I think the more you add, technology alone, you can't account for overall poor experience. I cannot tell you how many people, I myself included, did not have the best time, booking a hotel through online and so forth. And it's next to impossible to try to get a refund. But overall, more people are traveling than ever. So whoever can come up with a way to tell you, oh yeah, the hotel itself looks great, but it's across the street on a park that attracts junkies, then those kind of information will help you stand out. So your overall experience is that much better,
Or for Palo Alto, if you stay in a hotel in Palo Alto that's too close to the Caltrain, well, guess what? You're going to hear the whistle of the Caltrain every hour, hour after hour. You're not going to be able to necessarily get the quiet you want, right?
Exactly. And that's not that hard. I mean, how difficult is it now to be able to, have something like a drone or some aerial device that can simply, remain the standing pattern for a set amount of time. It's very easy to detect that sound and, do sound analysis, motion analysis, all kinds of things.
Well, the closest thing that comes to that I'm thinking of is Reddit often has a subgroup. And the subgroup will say stuff like, well, if you're in Palo Alto, keep in mind that there is a train station. And if you're going to be in near the train station, you're going to have to hear the noise. And if you're going to be on the other side of town, well, then you're going to be away from the train station. So you may have a long walk to get to the train station.
And that might be the perfect thing to create that extra sophisticated agent to do, because that kind of summarization is what, these things are custom made for. It's just a matter of how deep do you want to get in. Now, one of the coolest agents that I saw is that you can basically create a little bot to scrape any site you want. So you can literally point it to a site, exactly as you said. Go to Reddit, go to this subcategory, Palo Alto rental scenario. And then whatever it scrapes up, you say, create a summary for me, and then you create an index where you can just query against that. Tell me about noise level. Tell me about, any other kind of specific neighbor-related things that I should be mindful of. It's
let me just make one further comment about the MIT report, because I think it's required reading. I think the two things that are really required reading and listening is the MIT report on the one hand, relatively short compared to what it could have been, and two, this podcast that's called "What Could Go Wrong."
Please send it to me.
I'm going to send it to you because we have to do commentary on that.
Okay.
But you read the MIT report, listen to the podcast, and then think about, well, is the future that everyone will effectively be a contractor? Because they'll say, I gotta keep my coworker. I gotta keep my persona. Maybe I gotta keep it on a separate NVIDIA computer that I buy, the $3,000, whatever the model is that you know the model numbers better than I do, that they came out with, that's like a supercomputer in your pocket. And just say, I sell my services to whatever firm wants to buy them, but I own everything that's in my computer. That's my equipment that represents my scraping of whatever I've scraped, whatever I've decided to use, because that coworker, or maybe even teams of coworkers, are essentially my extension of me as a knowledge worker. And I can't detach from that anymore. Because when you listen to this guy on this podcast, it's very realistically done and it's not simulated. It really is the guy that's trying to come up with a script for a movie, and he develops essentially an AI to help him do it in a very interesting way. Is he doesn't want to lose that co-creator with him is part of him now. It Absolutely. Is part of him. He is not going to lose that.
Absolutely.
He's not. In fact, there are people that are jealous that he has it. They want to know, like, how did you do it? And he had to get
but
some
that's
help.
his secret sauce, right? And that's our investment thesis. We already know we're trying to invest on scenarios where we have domain experts like your screenwriter, but with a right marriage of state-of-the-art artificial intelligence, not necessarily whatever LLM comes down the pike, but then he's actually curated with his own data. That data that sets him apart, like exactly what you said, from his competitor, but now allows him to scale up, work faster, take on more jobs and so forth. Right. We want to be part of that matchmaker between the technology and enabling that domain expert to expand his presence, his scale, and his ambition. And I think there's going to be a very, very interesting business opportunity if we can turn that into service, because all these domain experts already are very good at it. They already know what their customer is looking for, but now we can kind of turbocharge their capability, and their productivity and what they can put out.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see an amazing next 5 years. And of course, for those who are lucky enough to live the next 50 years, I mean, I just can't imagine that it's not going to be a very different future from where we are today and where the trajectory goes. And as I said, I think VC firms are either going to completely embrace this approach, or where they say you have to be an AI first startup. We're not funding anything that isn't AI first from the ground up. We're just not doing it. And if that's not baked into the business plan and baked into the ideology of the business and the mindset of everyone that's part of it, we don't want to invest in it. It's just not, we don't see that it's going to compete. And we're going to see a lot of VC firms essentially go out of business or radically change, because I tell you, a little bit like the Moneyball movie, VCs think they can smell a good founder or they can smell a good startup. It's like the guy, at my first law firm who ended up smelling jobs in Wozniak and thought they smelled awful because they didn't bathe. And he basically almost kicked them out of the office for, not getting dressed up and bathing before coming to the meeting. I mean, that model of, well, we can just smell talent, that's going away. It's got to be the talent actually has to demonstrate. And I don't know whether the sort of Google approach where they give a lot of exams and tests and, puzzles and that sort of thing, whether we're going to see some version of that. Like, okay, here's the problem. Show me what you can produce with any AI you choose. They're all on the machine. Here's the machine. Basically, it's our equipment, but you have access to all of it. Go for it. And whether that's going to be the new model for how employment occurs, because I can tell you, I think if someone shows up saying, I don't want to use AI, I don't want anything to do with AI, I think AI is crazy. And there are lawyers like that definitely profess that view. I don't think they're going to be able to get jobs. I think they're going to be viewed as, well, why don't you go back and use a pencil and paper as opposed to typing on a computer? Like there are lawyers like that too, I think, and say, I don't touch a keyboard. I don't think they're employable. Even partners at law firms have to touch keyboards. Although maybe the real super senior older partners at the big law firms don't do it. But frankly, I think all of them do it. It's hard to imagine that you could get a job without doing it.
I think the advantage that technical people have at the start of any kind of ground shifting revolution, is always there. And then once the terrain gets more established and then there's an actual business process, then the folks that, hail more from the business world can step in and put together deals. And I think we're at the new cusp. It's not, the communication revolution. This is a AI/labor saving revolution. So right. I think the people who have, as you said, technical first, domain expertise, enhancing first mindset will have an advantage until this path also gets, highly ritualized.
Hey, we have some people that have come on from the firm. I don't know if you guys have any questions. I've been discussing with Dr. Chung, really something we've been talking about ever since it got released a week ago, this MIT report. I think I sent it to all of you. I don't know if you've had a chance to read it, but it sort of says what we all know, which is that there are a lot of these projects in big corporations fail to actually make the AI work. But it's clear that individuals that master the use of AI become irreplaceable and very, very valuable to the organization, even though the projects themselves to try to do the automation inside of an organization, 95% of the time it's failing. It's because it's like early in the cycle of trying to understand what can be automated versus what can't be automated. So I don't know if any of you have any questions. Now's the time to do it before we let Jan go.
I don't at the moment, but pleased to meet you, and I'll be looking into the report further. If I have anything, I'll send it through Jack.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think it's this a podcast too. I'd like you all to listen to. I sent the link for it. What can go wrong? It's really very well done. And when you analogize it to, hey, this is a script writer. You know, when you try a case, you write a script. A lot of people don't realize when you don't write a script in the exact words and the exact this and the exact that. You write an outline for a script of how the presentation to the judge and jury will go. And hopefully the script is rock solid and it's not going to fall apart at some point. The script is always under attack. It's a very, very adversarial process, whereas a movie, you know, there's a lot of editing. There's a lot of ways to fix the script, even if it's bad at the beginning. It's a blueprint, essentially a blueprint for an educational presentation. And most movies have a bit of education in them. They've got a lot of entertainment as well. Some trials have some entertainment in them too. But conceptually, it's a very similar role in many ways. It's a knowledge working role for creating something that's going to land with an audience. And the audience happens to be people in a movie house or at home. An audience in a courtroom is the judge and the jury. And so conceptually, as you listen to that podcast, and I'll resend the link so that everyone has it. It's free, by the way, but it may be you have to establish an Audible account to get it for free. And I don't know. I think Audible accounts are free, but maybe they charge you some minimal amount. It's definitely worth getting. It's definitely worth listening to, and reading the MIT report in that context. So Jan, thanks for your time. Anyone else?
It was nice meeting you. I hope I get to talk to each of you individually. The one thing that I want to enhance what Jack said is that, especially like the OpenAI and Anthropics of the world, try to present the view that AI started and ends with a large language model. And I'm here to tell you that, you know, especially with the latest release of GPT-5, in spite of the fact it's the best model that they ever created, it is so far disappointing when it comes to any kind of accurate planning or falling way, way short of this notion of AGI. So the better approach to take is to really understand the problem and then try to see what tool best matches. There are many, many approaches to ML and AI. And you know, unfortunately, too many of these LLM crew have been thinking that they're, you know, tools a hammer and everything in the world starts to look like a nail. And that's a very, very myopic viewpoint. And, you know, at the end of this month or next month in September, I'm going to go visit my old PhD advisor who's taken a complete different approach to AI called green learning, where he's getting in computer vision better output using models that are 1,000 times smaller, which allows it to be very, very fast on, you know, should excel at edge computing, and you don't actually have to go into this crazy arms race, you know, to build gargantuan models. So anyway, nice to meet you. Hopefully we can connect.
So Jan, one last point. Do you think the U.S. is going to stay ahead of the curve? Because clearly
I don't.
I had to ask you this because clearly OpenAI is burning billions of dollars. They're sucking every little.
It's not just billions of dollars. I think what people don't realize is that we just burned 1 year's equivalent of the entire private sector. Our economy is divided into 30% government, 70% private. And the only reason, in spite of all these, layoffs, our stock market hasn't crashed is because we have once in every 20-year infrastructure build that is completely subsuming and bolstering the economy where the private sector has waned. And we think that everything is kosher and, everybody's just putting all their attention to LLM, where places like China, they believe in central planning and, everything from utility to, their per capita in terms of engineering students being produced, in spite of all the headlines, Americans are actually, in terms of STEM per capita wise, we've been decreasing, which I find that astounding. Right. Now, with everybody saying, well, you shouldn't have told me to code because code is a guaranteed pathway to a cushy job. That's going to have the worst kind of blowback, where rather than figuring out an opportunity how to, really, really find out whether you wanted to program because you loved it or because mommy told you to get a cushy job, that's going to be a huge distinction. So maybe you can do a quick intro. I don't know everybody related, how you guys are involved with this.
I can start. My name's Taylor Glass. I'm an attorney. I contract with CLG. I'm independent, but I get most of my work through the firm. I've been with them for about, going on 4 years. I'm from Sacramento. I went to Santa Clara University for my undergrad. I went to McGeorge for law school, but I've lived in Guatemala for the last 7 years. So that's
where you're now, Guatemala?
Yeah.
Okay.
So pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Lin-Yan. I'm a paralegal at the firm. I think we met in person at the talk with I forgot Guy Kawasaki a long time ago. So I don't know if you remember.
You mean at Microsoft campus? Were you there at that auditorium?
Yes. Okay. It was Microsoft campus. Yeah. And there was Jack was there, and also John was there too. And yeah, I forgot when this was, but yeah. So
yeah, it was a couple of years ago. I really wanted to hear Guy Kawasaki talk, and I've been raving about him. So Jack, when he got an extra invite, he sent me that the surprise of that conversation was not Guy Kawasaki, but Jay Chaudhry, the guy who was a CEO of Zscaler, and his path has been even more startling than Guy's, maybe because Guy's is kind of self-promoting. But yeah, nice to meet you.
My name is Hira. I just started working at CLG like a month and a half ago. I graduated from Wellesley College and with a major in philosophy and English, and I'm hoping to matriculate into law school next cycle. I'm applying right now. So yeah, I'm just happy to be a fly on the wall and learning along the way.
So where are you located?
I am living in Tampa, Florida right now.
Tampa. So you're close to Jack. And Lin-Yan, you're in Bay Area?
Yeah, I'm in. Okay. Oh, Jack is back.
Sorry, the power just went off here, and everything just turned off. It was like maybe that's the final comment, which is we're using a lot of power.
Yeah, that's a telltale sign that like if you can't provide stable electricity, and I don't know if you guys heard this, but Constellation, which is a utility out of Utah and Colorado, decided not to retire a coal burning plant because, Mark Zuckerberg's Meta wanted a stable contract. So we can't even roll out sufficient utility. Not only is our bill going to go, sky roof, and I told Jack this, and I'm actually pursuing opportunities on using AI to do a better job of, energy production and reclaiming. But I think it's a crying shame. It's just we used to be the envy of the world, and now we can't even get infrastructure correctly to keep the lights on. And this is in Long Island, right, Jack? You're not in some third world country.
No, actually, I'm actually in New York today, but it's not, I don't know what just happened, but it's surprising because we assume electricity will be 7 by 24 by 365, and we now assume the internet will be 7 by 24, 365. And when it goes out, even for what might have been a minute there, people get very frustrated because everything just seems to end. The flow of the conversation maybe gets so disrupted that it seems like it's ending too. But, if you think about these AI personas that are going to be extensions of all of us, people are going to feel like if that thing isn't available, that person, because he actually ends up naming this co-script writer, he names it Lexter, that's the name he chooses, and he talks to it. So most of the interactions are actually verbal, and the thing talks back. So instead of just text going back and forth, they created an actual voice for the AI. So it sounds, and of course you can do this as well. And I've actually experimented doing it with a number of these tools where you can actually interact with it, and it feels like you're having a flowing conversation, a little bit like that movie from 20 years ago that I forget the name of it. I think it's called HER. That's another movie. That's
Scarlett Johansson, right? She was her voice, and Phoenix, Joaquin Phoenix was the fellow.
Right. OpenAI tried to use her, and she refused. They wanted to get her voice into it, and she refused to do it. And these guys talk about experimenting with different actors' voices for different roles. And the lawyers for obviously this is an operation, right? This is like Warner Brothers are like, wait a minute, we're going to get sued even for using their voices, their AI created voices without their permission, because in California, we have a strong law against copying, the look of, the feel of, the voice of another person. That's actually a privacy violation for which there can be liquidated damages, attorney's fees, injunctions, the whole 9 yards. A number of the states also have that statute, but there's no federal statute unless you use copyright, and copyright tends to be difficult to use in that area. But conceptually, they're like, yeah, let's just do it and just see what it's like, and then we'll stop it, because we're not publishing it. But they actually did publish it on the podcast. So they're probably going to get sued by some of these people that they decide to emulate, because they wanted to emulate them just to get the feel of, well, how would this movie actually end up sounding? Because it's going to be the sequel. It definitely sounds like they're going to come out with the sequel to Contagion. I don't know whether they're going to call it Contagion 2 or something else. But abstracting from the specifics of the podcast to where this knowledge work is going, I don't think you can stop it. It's like, to me, everyone's going to get on board, and everyone's going to want to have an assistant, because it just feels like you can interact in a way that gives a lot of immediate feedback that you can't get. And I'll say to the people that are in the group, just what it used to be many years ago. And my original partner in the very first version of the law firm, after I left Davis, Stafford, Kelman, and Fenwick, that became Fenwick and West, was a barrister from England. Her name was Daryl Nelson. She had tried something like 650 cases. She had more, I'd say she has more experience than the entire State Bar of California, than any lawyer or any firm of lawyers has in the State Bar of California. And Daryl used to say, the way you learn law is you get what's called a partner's desk. And the partner's desk has essentially drawers on each side, and the partners are opposite each other on the desk. And they're playing sort of a pro and con role, or an adversarial role, with each other about how to get the case ready. So one is acting as kind of the critical voice, and the other is trying to present the case. So you can think of it as this interactive partner to partner, partner to associate, partner with clerk. Basically, one-on-one. At Intel, they used to call it two in a box. Basically, two people who are working together across from the table with each other. That's going to be the model in what might be the preferred approach. I thought the model might be like 7 or 8 of these tools that are all operating simultaneously in different tabs, but maybe that's too hard to manage. That was his conclusion. It's too hard to manage. It's better to just have one who really gets to know you and gets to know what you want and gets to really get very, very competent at doing the things in a, sort of that you want done, and that surprises you from time to time. And it might be like having this team, which is how we started, with 7 or 8 people around a writer's room for brainstorming. Maybe that works at some stage, but in the actual finalization of the script, you essentially work with one co-author, and the co-author is this very sophisticated AI that becomes part of your persona. And that, to me, is a very interesting development. And I think we're going to see many different categories of professionals.
I think it's already happening. Like, one of the ways that you pass one of the final exams in radiology residence is to go up against the Johns Hopkins derived AI that does like 90+% accuracy, right? And I recently read that doctors who train to do colonoscopy, the AI will detect which targets to look for. And it turns out that for any reason, if the AI is off, then the accuracy of the human being goes way down. So exactly like an aid, exactly like a simulation of rivals or anticipating what the opposite side might come up with arguments. I think this story is going to keep coming in. We're going to get better and better and better. And the more we get comfortable and the more we can come up with realistic scenarios and simulations, the better we'll be prepared.
Right. Well, Jan, thank you for your time. It's been really valuable and educational. I know we're experimenting with a lot of these tools. We're trying to see where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are. It clearly can type a lot faster than any of us can type. There's just no question about that. If you ask it, write 3 paragraphs that explains the background to the story, and you put as the background, here's an interview that we did with the client, here's the text of the background of the story, it'll write the 3 paragraphs way faster than you could ever type those 3 paragraphs. And you may say, I don't really like those 3 paragraphs, but this idea of writer's block is going to be a thing of the past, because you're going to get something back that you can change and modify and revise and decide, am I going to use this or not use this? And to me, that's going to be an accelerant compared to we used to have a lawyer, I won't name him, but he used to wait to the very last minute because he was such a procrastinator, because he said, I have the idea hasn't gelled for me yet. I have to figure it out. I can't get it down on paper. I think that's a thing of the past. I think people will get down something and it will have to be improved substantially over time, and there'll be revision cycles and maybe a lot of revision cycles, but you're not going to have this situation where you wait until the 11th hour and you're like, okay, now I'm ready to write it. And then you write it and it's like, well, we ran out of time and we couldn't file it. We couldn't polish it. We couldn't do anything with it. That's going to go away. I mean, it's really going to be like, we can get a draft early and get input from a number of sources and then take that input and do a lot of revisions and a lot of checking and a lot of site checking and a lot of polishing and a lot of this and a lot of that. That's going to be the way things get done in law firms. I mean, and in other professional firms, more and more. I think that's the future. That's what's going to happen.
Nice meeting you guys. Take care.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks very much.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.